Folks, I have something special today because we're starting with the sticker when it comes to these two cars. Why? That's because both of these vehicles are just under $29,000 and they represent the two best cars in their class for what they are. And I'm talking about the 2022 Honda Civic, this one's the Touring, and the 2021 Mazda3, and this is a special Mazda3 because it has the manual transmission. So coming up, I'm going to tell you all about these vehicles, why they're worth the money, and why they're best in the class, and which one might be right for you. We are going to cover this brand new Honda, but I wanted to start with the Mazda because there's a lot of things that many of you may not know, and that is Mazda3s come in many different flavors. You can get all-wheel drive, you can get front-wheel drive, you can get a base model with a kind of anemic engine, you can get this powertrain, which is a 2.5, and then they have the 2.5 liter turbo, and you can get a manual transmission. This one has the manual transmission. Now here's the funny part about all of this. You cannot get a manual transmission with the base model. I don't know why. I mean, they've explained it, but it didn't make sense. You cannot get a manual transmission with the all-wheel drive either. You cannot get a manual transmission with the turbo. So you can get like the mid-level, still very powerful engine, front-wheel drive, but you can only get it with the hatchback. And you can only get it with the top package. I know it doesn't make a lot of sense. I always thought entry-level vehicles should have a manual transmission option, keeping everything cheap and simple. Nonetheless, this vehicle's powertrain is damn good. The basis of this engine, well, it goes back a ways. 2.5 liter Skyactiv G. It's a fantastic powertrain, really good power, 186 horsepower and 186 pound-feet of torque. And hooked up to the manual transmission, this car performs brilliantly. Unfortunately, there is a caveat, which is, because of this setup, you're stuck getting, here it is, 27 miles per gallon combined. That's not great. In this industry, a lot of vehicles are doing a lot better, including that Honda, which we'll cover in a minute. The thing is, and what's important to keep in mind, is that you are getting performance and fun. Here's one of the things I needed to point out, aside from the fact that this is a beautiful looking interior. Aesthetics, beautiful. But little things stand out, and some of you guys might have an issue with them. So let me point them out. This is an 8.8-inch screen, so it's not the biggest in the industry, not at all. My problem is this. Touch it. I'm not going to touch it too much, because this actually isn't a loaner car. This is TFL Studios manager Zach's car, and if I do anything to smear it, break it, or anything else, he will murder me. So that's one of the issues. Can't use touchability. It's not a touch screen, so you have to use this. It's like kind of like a BMW iDrive setup. You turn the knob to scroll and move around and whatnot. I'm not a big fan of it. I would much rather have a touch screen with a couple buttons on the steering wheel and be done with it. And this just seems a little overcomplicated for what you're doing. Okay, that being said, comfort. The seats are very comfortable, even for my large American ass. Headroom, not great. It's okay. And I have to have the seat slightly leaned back, so normally I like to be almost bolt upright. It's close. The rest of the vehicle is fantastic. I just love looking at it. But I wanted to show you the back seat. All right, before I get in, I wanted to point something out, and this is one of the issues with both the sedan and the hatchback version of the Mazda3. Look down here. Now, I am around 6'1" and girthy, so I have the seat almost all the way back, like one click away from being all the way back. Yeah, so here I go. I got a size 13. Okay, and then here we go. And I'm not over-exaggerating my movements to do this. But in order to get in here, let's just do this. There. One foot got under the seat, the other one not so much. Headroom is tight. The sedan doesn't quite feel as tight, maybe because the roof is slightly different shape. So you have to be a shorter adult to appreciate the space back here. The seats themselves are comfortable on the tush, but unfortunately, not so much when it comes to headroom and legroom. Also, no vents here, which is something that I do think is an issue. All cars should have vents here as far as I'm concerned. I love hatchbacks because they are utilitarian. This one is as well. 20.1 cubic feet of cargo space, which is really good. Way better than the sedan. The sedan version of this gives you like 13.1 cubic feet. So, not great, but I wanted to point out something just in general in terms of the way this vehicle is laid out. The trunk and the hatchback version of the Mazda 3 still look like $1,000,000 when you close it. I love the design. I know not all of you do. You're crazy, but I think that it's still one of the best looking small cars in its class. Now, shall we transition from the mighty Mazda over to the all-new 2022 Honda Civic? New platform, new powertrain, sort of, and new interior, new exterior design. Those are really the big parts of this. Now, as you know, Honda does provide a couple different versions of the Civic, and in the future, we're expecting to see a lot more. For instance, right now, we don't have an SI, nor do we have the hatchback available yet, nor do we have the Type R. But we hear that all of those are coming. In fact, we know that the hatchback's coming. I'm really hoping that there'll be an SI and an R soon. With that being said, you still can get other versions of the Honda Civic. So, as an example, if you want a manual transmission, you have to get the hatchback. The good news is, from what I understand, unlike Mazda, you don't have to get the very top of the line in order to get the manual transmission, which is great. So, what do we have here with this particular Honda Civic, other than the fact that it looks like a baby Honda Accord? Honda's had this 1.5 liter turbo for a little while now, and some people like it and some people don't. But we're not going to go into that. What we are going to go into is what it can do, which is 180 horsepower and 177 pound-feet of torque. So not quite the numbers of the Mazda. And interestingly, they weigh about the same. The Mazda can weigh a lot more, especially if you put on all-wheel drive. That's an extra like 220 pounds or whatever. But as they sit, they're a little over 3,000 pounds. This has a continuously variable transmission, a CVT. Honda builds one of the better ones in the industry. With this combination, according to the paper, you're getting 34 miles per gallon on the highway. That is significantly higher than the Mazda. Why is that? Well, continuously variable transmissions really have economy as part of their byline. That is what they do, and that is exactly what this vehicle does. But in terms of passing power, in terms of being able to perform on the highway, it does great. All right, so let's get into the Honda. Much higher roof, much easier to get in and out of, even though it's a fairly low car. So for those of you who prefer the high butt position of a crossover, which is why I think a majority of people buy them, this doesn't have it. But what it does have is an all-new interior. And I like to call this interior sober, adult, and a little futuristic. It's a very simple layout, which I like. I love these vent controls. How simple can you get? Look at these. Fantastic. So let's talk about the layout in general, just like we were talking about with the Mazda. First of all, the screen is slightly larger than the Mazda's. This is a 9-inch screen here, and the good news is it is a touch screen. And that's really, really important. There's a lot of people out there who need a touchscreen. I'm one of those people. And it's so simple. I say that Mazda has dropped a couple spaces down when you compare it to this. Okay, and then down here, unlike the Mazda where you had the control mostly for infotainment, this is actually driver control. So your drive mode, you can shut off, start, stop, and brake hold, parking brake. Both vehicles have electronic parking brakes, which is kind of a bummer, but whatever. Okay, the rest of the vehicle is set up in a comfortable, simple package. It's almost minimalist, and it's completely different than old Civics. But despite all this, and the fact that I think it's a beautiful interior, I think that the Mazda interior just looks so much better. But there is another place that Honda absolutely knocked it out of the park, and that is the back seat. Oh yeah, I fit. My big feet go under the seat, no problem. There is a little bit of a scallop here for my head. So if I go way back, I'm bumping. But if I'm sitting normal, I slouch a bit. It's absolutely fine. First of all, good news. You do have a little spot here to power up. But you notice there are no vents here either. Guys, Vents for the rear passengers, please, especially if you're making so much space for the rear passenger. So the trunk is big. That is a 14 cubic foot trunk space there, that is. That puts it on par with much larger vehicles like a Toyota Camry and whatnot. Even though there's all this extra space here, and of course split folding seats, just like the Mazda, you do have, yep, spare tire, little donut, and there's a little bit of space there to add some stuff. I do not know what the cargo space is on the hatchback yet, but I am going to assume it'll be more than this. Also forgot to mention, yep, the Mazda has one too, and that is a subwoofer. Whoop, whoop. Yep. Let's talk about design, because that's one of the big differences between these two cars. First, talking about the Kodo design that was used with Mazda. It is a flowing, beautiful design. Not everybody loves it, and not everybody loves this color. There's a lot of other colors out there. Mazda does a beautiful red and a beautiful blue as well, a couple different blues. But once again, it's not to everybody's taste. And the hatchback version of this car is polarizing. Some people absolutely love it and some really do not. So it is a unique design. This particular vehicle, because it is the top of the line, it has everything, including these beautiful black wheels. But let's talk about the Honda. Very different. All new exterior design. What they went for was no longer a playful little Civic. They went for an adult Civic. So what you have here, in my mind, is a slightly smaller Honda Accord. And that's not a bad thing, because I like the styling of the Accord with a couple minor issues. This kind of takes care of those issues. I think it's a fabulous design. In person, I highly recommend that you actually look at the car in steel. Looking at it with photos and video, it might not look as detailed. You may not see those really beautiful curves, headlights, things like that. Seeing them up close makes a world of difference. By the way, both of these vehicles do compete, of course, with the Toyota Corolla. They're both better than the Corolla. Sorry to say that, but the Corolla has a dreadful little back seat area, and the performance of these two vehicles, much better. And of course, you have Hyundai and Kia, the Elantra and the Forte. Those vehicles are excellent. But once again, I think that these two are the best in their class. Not just with design, not just with handling, not just with overall performance and interior design, but overall feel. Now, when we do these type of reviews, we're not throwing it around a track. That's what we have Paul for, and we do 0 to 60s and whatnot. But you've already seen the Mazda perform. Obviously, the turbo is a lot faster, but this 2.5 really does perform quite well. There are a lot of interesting things with the Mazda 3. They chose to have an unusual rear end setup. Instead of having an independent rear suspension, it actually has a torsion beam, but it's a very unique version of that from Mazda. And in most performance situations, it's quite nice. It's a nice trade-off. By the way, it's the same suspension whether you have the all-wheel drive or front-wheel drive. Yes, check those facts, because it's actually true. The trade-off is you have a firm suspension in a vehicle that does feel almost European. I really like the way the ride is in Mazda 3s. For those of you who are fans of shift it yourself or stirring your own coffee or whatever you want to say, the setup on this is great. Going from one gear to another, it's a nice click. It's not bolt action or anything like that, but it's very easy to find a gear. This would be an ideal transmission to teach somebody how to drive a manual transmission. Very light, very short throws, so very nice manual transmission. I am really looking forward to seeing what Honda comes up with when their hatchback comes out with the manual transmission option. So it's not perfect, but it rewards you, makes you feel pretty good as you're driving back and forth to work or as you're going back and forth to school. Is it a family car? No. That is the domain of the Honda. There are only a few negative things to say about the Honda. Very few. This thing is so well put together. It feels so solid. Performance is great. It's not stellar. I wanted to show you right off the bat one of my issues, and I can actually do that right here. It's just a minor thing with acceleration. Now, I'm not going to do anything special. I'm just going to go about 100 feet and accelerate, right? So here we go. Pressing on the gas pedal now. There it is. It's not just a little bit of turbo lag, and it's not just the start-stop system that has to activate, but it's also the CVT that has to sort of catch up with everything. All of those things combined make for a vehicle that's a little tiny bit sluggish off the line, but still once it gets up and the power gets going, it moves. So that's the sacrifice with the continuously variable transmission. But their handling is just outstanding. Steering feel, neither car has the best. Mazda's better. But this one really does deliver. When you're going around a corner, it feels like the whole thing is just planted. But what I'm already seeing with what is basically an economy setup, you know, CVT and a very small displacement 1.5 liter engine. Oh my God. Obviously, both these vehicles can be had for a much lower price, even though today's prices are a little ridiculous. But with $29,000, which one would you get? Personally speaking, as much as I absolutely love the Honda, I'd get the Mazda simply because I love the way it handles. The Honda handles fantastic. It is a wonderful car, and I'm sure that once it gets its manual transmission in the hatchback, it'll be excellent. But I'm a little bit more attracted to the Mazda. You may be different, and for commuters, the Honda makes so much more sense. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let us know in the comments below which one you would prefer. Oh, and by the way, one final thing, in case you were wondering. Last year in 2020, despite being a COVID year, Honda sold, well over 300,000 of their vehicles in North America. Mazda was closer to the 40s. Big difference in terms of vehicles, big difference in terms of who's buying which car. I want to know what your opinions are in the comments below. Thank you for joining me. I'll see you next time.